Thank you, everybody. So, starting with a bit of a repeat of an introduction. So, I am not a very well-known entity in the AI space. My background's primarily in open source infrastructure. And I'm mostly a startup guy. About 15 years ago, when cloud was cool, I started a company called Mirantis, helped co-found it and scale it. Then maybe 10 years later, when cloud was no longer cool, but 5G was really cool, I built a company focused on open source private 5G, and that was fairly successful, quick exit, only 2.5 years after founding. That company got acquired by Helium Mobile, which is a telecom carrier, basically. And since now all the rage is about AI, I started dabbling a little bit in open source AI and AI infrastructure space. So the talk today is about GenBI. So what's GenBI? GenBI is a cool term that stands for Generative Business Intelligence. In plain speak, that means offering an ability to people to basically talk to data. So the world of BI is all kind of charts and tables. Obviously, now that we're in a world of ChatGPT and chatbots, you just want to be able to ask any specific quantitative question and get an instant answer. Sounds like a very cool value proposition. And from a business standpoint, I was always puzzled as to why there is not really a lot of successes that we hear about when it comes to generative BI. In my mind, from the standpoint of value add, it is not less than coding copilots. The value is tremendous, and there is probably over a dozen coding copilot companies that are, well over $1 billion valuation. But if you look at the number of generative BI companies, there isn't almost any that are worth $1 billion or more. And this is not for the lack of trying. There's a lot of very credible open source efforts, as well as small funded startups that are actually trying to do stuff in the space. And I was kind of, puzzled by this, and I think that that's maybe an opportunity. So I started by actually, trying things hands-on, because the way that I started my 2 previous companies is I just basically went in and started doing the thing that they've ended up basically, becoming a company around. So for Mirantis, we had a basically like an internet service provider who was looking to build a cloud, and we went in and we just tried to build a cloud for them. For FreedomFi, I literally stood up a 5G cell tower on the roof of my house and tried to build it and see how it works. And for this particular case, I figured that what we can do is we can take the company that acquired my previous startup, Helium Mobile, and see if we can implement a generative BI system internally and see what happens. These types of systems are particularly useful for companies that deal with a lot of data. And like a mobile broadband company, deals with a lot of subscribers, a lot of customers. A lot of its success is based on its ability to understand what what allows people to subscribe, what the churn rate is, et cetera. So it's a very data-hungry business. And the way we went about implementing is, okay, let's just, take all the data that we had and attach effectively a chatbot with some RAG engine to it. And the general cycle would work as follows. So you go in there, you ask a question, you get some answer, and then you repeat. So very much similar to what you do with just the typical chatbot like ChatGPT. The way that you implement most GenBI systems is, roughly the same across the board. You basically take the user prompt, you do some RAG with the user prompt and do some prompt augmentation. You take the user prompt, you, in addition to the user prompt, effectively explain what the database structure looks like, what kind of data is in different columns, supplemented with maybe some business term definitions so that the system knows what, for example, a subscriber is. And then you send that to an LLM to generate an SQL. You get that SQL, you interpret it, and then you spit out the answer. And that's kind of a general pattern for it. So we implemented it and kind of did a small push internally. And a few people used it maybe a couple of times, and then nothing happened. So it was I would say a disaster. So our first impression was okay, well, it's probably because we are not giving people the correct answers. So something's wrong with our text to SQL engine. But then we spent some cycles and we talked to some users of the system actually and looked at the data a little bit deeper. And what we've uncovered, I think, is potentially an answer not just why we weren't successful, but also why a lot of the GenBI systems today broadly are not as successful as they could be. So if you go back to the example between BI copilots and coding copilots, it's important to understand that the audience and the usage patterns and the expectations of these two groups are vastly different. So the coding copilots, you're dealing with engineers. BI copilots, you're dealing with a business user. And the engineer goes into effectively a chatbot experience, like Cloud Code, for instance, with the expectation that they're building stuff and they're going to be iterating on the outcome. No engineer goes in and loads Cloud Code and puts in a single prompt and expects that the application is immediately built and can be launched with one-shot prompt. When it comes to a business user, the business user, they expect one-shot magic almost every single time. So if I want to go in and find out how many subscribers I had in California yesterday, I want the exact answer immediately. And the problem with that is oftentimes the person that is generating the prompt, they don't even fully understand themselves what is it that they want to ask. So the second part is that you can make the coding copilots better by making actually the AI agent better, make the agentic flow better, make it write code better, etc. When it comes to the BI copilots, the problem of generating SQL is not that hard. If you take literally Cloud Code and just point it to a database, it's able to pull in the structure of a database and you can talk to the database using Cloud Code. The problem is disambiguating the intent of the user, because the business user that is actually using a BI copilot, they're not an engineer, and oftentimes they go in, they don't even know what to ask. In fact, if you present them with a blank screen, they don't even understand what the system is capable of, what the limitations of the data are. And finally, the pattern for the engineer is that you iterate, you build something, you come back, you build something else, so you're constantly iterating. For a business user, if I go into a BI system and I ask, how many subscribers did we have yesterday, I don't want to be coming back every single day and asking that same question. I'm used to working with charts, I'm used to working with graphs. So if I've built basically an answer for myself, I want to have a place where I can come back to and I will immediately see this without having to explain to the system what is it that I want. So we did a take two on it, and with all of this in mind, we basically altered the flow dramatically, which also dramatically improved the uptake and the usage on the system. So we said, okay, we're not going to start with an empty chat box. We're going to start with actually a table or a chart so that a person exactly comes to a chart that is showing something. And then you can edit this chart, and you can basically decompose it into, like, if it's a chart, it'll show you the tabular data behind the chart and the explanation exactly of how this data been derived. And we call this thing like a semantic editor of a chart. So you can actually talk to the semantic editor, you can highlight columns, rows, etc., and you can, through iteration, arrive to an outcome that is actually the answer. And then finally, you can actually, whatever is the final answer, you can save it and have a place to come back. And what this does is, first of all, it completely resets the expectations of a user. So you're no longer presenting them with an empty chat box. They know what to ask because they start with a chart. The iteration through the semantic editor actually allows them to kind of like maintain the context, and they understand the numbers as they change. So it's not like they ask some question, oh, the question is wrong, okay, I'm not coming back to it. They can see exactly how this question was derived, and if something is wrong about the data, they can see what exactly was wrong, maybe some extra column, maybe too many columns, something like this. And then they can save it and they come back to it. So final words. So we've been iterating on this. We're still not quite, anywhere finished. Our objective is to kind of understand what is the best way to sort of build a system that is easy for an organization to adopt. And we know that, companies, especially big companies with established patterns, they don't like implementing new tools. So the thing that we're working on now is we are basically replacing the existing sort of charting and tabular engine that we have in Semantic Grid with the ability to integrate with the existing BI system. So the one company in particular we're working with is using Superset very heavily, and that's open source and pretty easy to integrate with. And the chatbot / interface that we've built for iterating on actually modifying the charts. We've had some luck experimenting, actually integrating into like third-party web chat clients using a pretty cool project called MCP UX, which I suggest most of you guys should check it out, which, again, will allow us to deliver that same experience of actually starting with a chart, iterating on a chart or a table, and then saving it to some place without necessarily introducing a whole bunch of like new tools or interfaces into the organization, just piggybacking off of what's already being used internally, hopefully. So we just recently opened the code up, so we are iterating in the open on this. So if anybody is interested in playing with it or has any questions about it, feel free to ask me or ping me. And that's it. So if we have time for questions, maybe questions. If not, I'm done.
1 minute for question if anybody has. Yeah. No? Okay, well, if you can think of any more questions, I think, Boris, you're still here. So you can go over to the interview room or the hallway to ask him questions, too. In the meantime, we will be getting ready for the next speaker. The last one of the day will be Francis. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.